Have you ever actually stopped and wondered why your brain automatically tries to make sense out of a completely chaotic world? Well, in this explainer, we're jumping straight into exactly how your mind is hardwired to organize that mess into real meaning. We're going to decode the Gestalt laws of learning, look at the literal visual shortcuts your brain takes every single second, and uncover how leveraging these shortcuts can completely revolutionize the way we approach learning. But before we get bogged down in the heavy educational theory, I actually want you to notice your own perceptual biases right now as we tackle this big question. How does your brain turn scattered pieces into a meaningful whole? Think about it. We are constantly bombarded by millions of tiny stimuli, right? Yet we don't experience the world as this disjointed random mess. We see unified objects, continuous lines, whole concepts. Your brain is doing some serious heavy lifting behind the scenes to make that happen. And figuring out how it does this, that's the real secret to unlocking better learning.
To get there, here's our game plan. First, the unified whole. Second, the 4 laws of perception. And third, transforming how we learn.
Starting off with Section 1, the unified whole, which is really the absolute foundation of Gestalt theory. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. You've probably heard it a million times, but this famous phrase is the absolute cornerstone of what we're talking about today. It's a reminder that we don't just see isolated fragments. I mean, when you look at a bicycle, you don't just see a pile of metal tubes, some rubber, and a greasy chain. No way, you see a bicycle. The overarching identity, the whole of the object, has a meaning that is totally distinct from just tallying up its individual components. And you know what? This directly translates to how we acquire knowledge. Gestalt theory basically says that learning happens when we organize the separate parts, the stimuli, of our perceptual field into a unified, meaningful whole. Instead of mechanically cramming isolated facts the night before a test and just, crossing your fingers hoping they stick, true learning actually happens when we actively organize those individual data points into one cohesive picture. If the pieces don't connect into a broader whole, well, learning hasn't really happened. Moving right along to Section 2, the 4 laws of perception. This is all about how the brain automatically organizes those stimuli. Okay, take a look at this. Notice how your brain naturally draws a line connecting the O's inside that field of X's. You aren't just seeing a random alphabet soup. You immediately perceive a distinct structure. This is the law of similarity in action, which tells us that elements get grouped together perceptually if they look alike. Because the O's share a similar shape, your brain automatically groups them together, just plucking them right out from the background. Now check this one out. You don't see 9 individual isolated vertical lines, do you? You instantly see 3 distinct sets of lines. This brilliantly proves the law of proximity. This law is all about our tendency to perceive things that are closer to one another as belonging together. Because these lines are physically clustered in tight groups of 3, the closeness implies a group. Your brain is literally saving processing power by recognizing the clusters instead of counting every single line. Next up, we have the law of closure. Look at this incomplete ellipse. You don't see it as a weird collection of curved dashes, right? Your mind instantly fills in the missing gaps to make you perceive a complete, solid circle. This law states that we naturally tend to close the open edges of a figure to complete the shape. We overwhelmingly prefer enclosed, completed figures over open ones. So your brain just steps in, does the extra work, and bridges those gaps for you. And finally, there's the law of continuity. See how these shapes appear as separate, continuous rings instead of some disjointed, disrupted spiral? That's because your mind absolutely prefers smooth, uninterrupted paths. The law here states that we link individual elements so they form a continuous pattern that actually makes sense. We basically reject disrupted forms in favor of smoothly flowing ones. Let's take just a quick second to lock in these 4 shortcuts because they dictate how we unconsciously organize our entire world. We've got similarity, things that look alike are grouped, proximity, things that are physically close are grouped, closure, our minds filling in the blanks, and continuity, linking elements into smooth patterns. Guys, these aren't just fun little optical illusions. They are the fundamental processing rules of the human brain. Which brings us to Section 3, transforming how we learn, focusing on the practical educational implications of Gestalt theory. Think about it. If this is how the brain naturally organizes information, shouldn't we organize our education the exact same way? Gestalt theory gives us these 5 powerful educational implications that pivot sharply away from traditional rote memorization. Let's break down each of these steps and see how they can completely change the real world of learning. First up, we absolutely must move from the whole to the parts. Because the whole is greater than its parts, we have to introduce the big picture before drilling down into the microscopic details. If you're teaching a complex historical event or a dense scientific system, you've got to give the learner complete insight into the main theme first. Once they see the whole picture, the individual facts, the parts, suddenly have a logical place to live, kind of like those O's finding their place in the field of X's. Second, we need an integrated approach. Subject content should never, ever be treated as just a collection of isolated facts. Think back to that law of proximity. We learn so much better when things are grouped logically. Topics need to be closely woven together so the learner sees how one concept directly influences another. That creates a truly meaningful whole, rather than just a disjointed list of trivia.
Third is creating motivation. If we want true motivation, we have to spark real curiosity. The learning material has to ensure the learner understands the ultimate purpose behind every single task they undertake. Just like the law of continuity seeks a smooth, unbroken path, learners need to clearly see the continuous path from what they're studying right now to the ultimate goal they're trying to reach. Connecting those dots, that is literally everything.
So here is the crucial takeaway from all of this. For higher learning, mechanical repetition and blind processing are basically useless. Just staring at the parts will never give you the whole. What's actually required is deep understanding and genuine insight. It might feel like it takes way longer to understand the why instead of just memorizing the what, but learning by insight actually saves time and energy in the long run. Why? Because the knowledge actually sticks. And that leads perfectly into our final takeaway, a problem-solving approach. Gestalt theory stresses that learners must be given the space to exercise their own powers of observation. Instead of just being passive receivers sitting at a desk, students need to be put in the position of discoverers. When a student actually discovers that missing link, when they get to experience that aha moment of closure for themselves, that learning is deeply, permanently cemented into their mind. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a pivotal question to chew on for your own educational journey. Whether you're a teacher, a manager, or just someone trying to pick up a new skill, are you treating yourself or your students as mere memorizers of isolated parts? Or are you actually empowering them to be discoverers of a meaningful whole? Remember, the brain is already built to find the connections. It's totally up to us to provide the right environment for those connections to thrive. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive, and keep seeking the bigger picture.